Hi, my name is Ellie Eubanks, and I'll be doing my artist presentation on Alex Colville. Sorry, I can't get it full screen. Every time I do that, it pauses my entire recording and doesn't work. So that's that's what's happening. Um, so Alex Colville. Brief background. He was born in Toronto, Canada in 1920 and died in Canada in 2013. The style that Colville's art is known as magical realism, a term used in art and literature to describe works that are fictitious but also realistic. Colville's work is a great example of this. His work balances whimsy with realistic imagery of the real world. He's pictured here to the left, a young Alex Colville. All right, three works, all completed in 1945. We have Bodies on a Road, Exhausted Prisoners, and Tragic Landscape. Colville made a handful of pieces directly in reference to the carnage of war, with explicit depictions of death and anguish. His preference of painting in muted colors was advantageous in his commentary of World War II, as it showed the way the entire world was feeling in 1945. Um, at the time, Alex was 25 years old when these were completed, so he had been an adult through the entirety of World War II, which draws in a lot of inspiration for these works. Um, Shapes in these pieces are clearly defined and look like they fit into their environment. Um, so the piece on the top is Bodies on a Road, which is as gruesome as the title would say it is. It's two bodies pictured in a road, and it's one of his few pieces that's an entirely grayscale work. Most of his are in muted colors, but this one is just entirely grayscale. Um, and then immediately or directly below it is Exhausted Prisoners. They appear to be on one of the work camps that were a thing during World War II. Um, and most of the painting is in warm colors, like orange and red, which directly contrasts the blue of the uniforms or the outfits that they have the prisoners in. And then to the right of that is Tragic Landscape, where a what appears to be a soldier is pictured laying in the field of a farm. He's got a cow immediately to his right and a building that looks like a barn or a farmhouse in the background. It's not clear if the soldier is alive or dead, but he's not doing well regardless. Next, we have A Littered Dugout, also completed in 1945. Colville's early work looked very different from his later magical realistic works, as you'll see. In contrast, his earlier works feature shapes with bold shading and outlines in a more illustrative style. For me personally, this piece was very reminiscent of illustrations in books such as Frog and Toad by both the art style and the color palette that he went with. Um, Made during World War II, the muted colors reflect the mood of the times. Um, Most of his works were painted in very muted colors. Even the ones that were a bit brighter, which this actually kind of is a brighter one of his, are not as bright as you would think a bright work would be. And here's an example that it gets even more muted with The Plotting Table, also completed in 1945. This is another one that's very clearly about the war, very in direct relation to the war. Um, the Plotting Table pictures a soldier or an engineer at a table with aircraft plans pinned to the wall to his left. The colors remain consistent with his other pieces being muted to evoke a melancholic feeling in association with world events at the time. And as opposed to his later work, which we'll see, this piece has a clear source of light and the environment is impacted accordingly. So here we have one lamp here and another lamp up here, and the environment is receiving that light as it would in real life, which this is very different than some of his later work, as you can see here. This is Horse and Train, completed in 1954. The work evokes an uneasy feeling in the viewer as it's concerning to see the horse in the foreground running straight down the train tracks towards a moving train. We can tell that the train's moving by the smoke or the steam coming out the top. The horse itself casts no shadow and is painted sharply around the edges, contrasting the smooth shading of the coat. So we can't tell if all 4 feet are off the floor at this point, or if we've got one on the ground here, because there's no shadow connecting directly to the horse. So it makes it look like it's floating more. And then you can see the sharp edges around the horse. There's no fluff or fuzz as there would be on a real horse. Very little texture, if any at all. There's a little bit in the tail here, but again, there's no stray or flyaway hairs in the tail like there would be in a real horse. This iconic style of Colville's is interesting, as it looks as though it's from an early 2000s video game, despite being made decades earlier. And this is what initially drew me to his work, and I think what intrigues a lot of, especially younger people, about his work, because it feels nostalgic despite being so old. Here we have Three Sheep, 1954. Another piece with dull, muted colors and no shadows. Like there's no shadow from this fence as there would be in real life or under the sheep. The texture within the wool varies very little. There's a little bit of variation here and a little bit there, but for the most part, it's very consistent. The horizontal texture on the water here, or on the sky, makes it look like water. Maybe it is water. That's the point. It's unclear. The gloom and the blank stares of the sheep invoke an eerie feeling. This is something that I really like about his work too, is that it's not scary or inherently creepy, but it can make you a little uneasy with how robotic everything looks. This is The Swimming Race, finished in 1958. This piece is a great example of Colville's work where the scenery is bright, but no shadows are present. Like it's very bright compared to a lot of his works that we just looked at, but there's no shadow underneath any of these jumpers, whether on the water or maybe there could be one over here on the concrete, but there's none at all. The texture of the water is sharp and unnatural, looking disturbed despite being empty. The texture is reminiscent of water, but it's not like what water looks like in real life. But it's an interesting interpretation of it. And besides the water, not much other texture is present. I mean, the people themselves could be, Barbie dolls. There's very little variation here. No texture anywhere, even on the concrete. Anywhere really besides the water. Here is To Prince Edward Island, finished in 1965. We have a female passenger pictured looking through binoculars on a boat ride. And here's some more of his signature manipulation of light, where the light source is not clearly defined or coming from a singular direction, and it's not interacting with the environment in a way that you would see in the real world, where it's obviously a clear day, sun is likely overhead, very few clouds, but we have no shadow of that binocular strap on the woman's clothes, and we don't have any shadow on the back of the bench here from binoculars or her arms or anything like that. Here is Pacific, completed in 1967. This gets into more of the dark themes of Colville, even outside of the context of war. Um, Pictured is a man looking out his sliding doors of his beachfront home. However, a gun lies on the table in the foreground. It also appears like there's a ruler, either carved into the table or a long ruler sat on the table, which is just another question that comes from looking at this piece. Some of the other questions is what exactly is going on? Is the man some sort of big time drug dealer or hitman, and that's how he obtained this property? Is he a rich but empty man who is suicidal? What's the story here? What's with the gun? What's with this expensive house? And then here, finally, we have Dog and Priest, completed in 1978. It's another one of the cold and gloomy works of Colville's, where a priest in his work attire is pictured on a dock or boardwalk with his black lab. The all-black priest's outfit matches perfectly with the dog, making the piece look cohesive and actually delivers a sense of serenity despite the dark colors and gloomy weather. I found this piece to be one of the more easygoing, if you will, pieces of Colville's. I mean, the dog and the priest just, it's like one of the pieces where people just look like they're hanging out. And there's not something kind of sinister going on. I mean, the dog looks a little, reminiscent of the early 2000s video games, but nothing sketchy going on here, and it looks very peaceful. And that's Alex Colville. Thank you.